In this video, we are going to talk about polynomials. The four main things we do with polynomials are we add them, subtract them, multiply them, and divide them. So let's talk about adding. First of all, for adding, basically what you need to do is combine like terms. Let's look at an example. For example, we have 2x squared plus 3x plus 4. We're going to add another polynomial, negative x squared plus 2x minus 7. Now we need you to combine like terms. Remember, like terms mean they have the same variable raised to the same power. So let's start off with the 2x squared and the negative x squared. Those are like terms. Well, 2x squared minus x squared, we can go ahead and write it here. We're adding them, 2x squared plus a negative x squared. That's going to give us our first term, which I'm going to write over here. 2 minus 1 gives us a 1, so that's just x squared for those terms. Let's move on to 3x. 3x plus 2x, those are like terms. And those give us a 5x when we combine them. And finally, the constant terms, 4 plus negative 7. That's the same thing as 4 minus 7, and that gives us a negative 3. So you can see here, all I did was I combined like terms to add the two polynomials. Now let's move on to subtracting. It has one little twist. I need to make sure I subtract everything in that second polynomial. Sometimes students just subtract the very first term there. We need to subtract it all. So what I would recommend is that you distribute the minus sign. Then combine like terms. And here's what I mean. I have 2x squared plus 3x plus 4 at the beginning. Now I'm going to subtract the negative x squared. Well, minus a negative is the same thing as adding x squared. I'm also subtracting the 2x, so I'm going to write minus 2x. You see, I'm distributing that minus sign. And finally, I'm subtracting a negative 7. Minus a negative 7 gives us plus. And this works the same way, even if there was a number in front here, like a 2, first thing I would do is distribute that negative 2 to all three parts of the polynomial right after it. Alright, that's not part of our problem here. The next thing I can do is combine like terms just like I did before. So now I have 2x squared plus 1x squared. That gives us 3x squared. I have 3x minus 2x, which gives us just a plain old 1x, which I write as x. And I have 4 plus 7, which is 11. So make sure to distribute that minus sign and then combine like terms. The third thing we do is multiply. Now, it kind of depends on what kind of things you're dealing with here. So I'm going to give you a few different examples. Something that you may have heard of is FOIL. I'll tell you how to do that. The basic concept is that we multiply each term in the first group by each term in the second group. Let's start off with the simplest example, which is a monomial, the 2x, by a binomial, x squared plus 4. And this is just distributing. We distribute the 2x to the x squared. Remember, that means I add the exponent, so I get 2x to the third. And we distribute it to the 4, and that gives me 8x. So a monomial by anything, multiplied by anything, can just be thought of as distributing. Now, what if we have two binomials? Here I have 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 2. And here's where we can use the acronym FOIL. It stands for first, outer, inner, last. What it means is I'm first going to multiply the first terms in each group, the 2x by the 3x, and I get 6x squared. Then I move on to the outer terms. That's the 2x times the negative 2, which gives me a negative 4x. Next come the inner terms. 1 times 3x gives us 3x. And finally, the last terms. 1 times negative 2 is a negative 2. And then the last thing I need to do is combine like terms. You can see these in the middle here can be combined. They are like terms because they both have an x. So let's keep the 6x squared in front. Minus 4x plus 3x is negative 1x. With a negative 2 on the end. So I use the acronym FOIL, but really what I'm doing is multiplying each term in the first group by each term in the second group. Now let's look at another example where it's a binomial times a trinomial, something with 3 parts. And I'm going to multiply each term in the first group by each term in the second group, just like I did before. So let's start with the 2x. I'll multiply it by the x, which gives me 2x squared. I'll multiply it by the 2x squared, which gives me 4x, add those exponents, get a 3. And I'll multiply it by the negative 4, which gives me negative 8x. So I multiplied the 2x by each of the terms in the second group. Now we'll do the same with the 1. Multiply it by the x, I get just a 1x. Multiply it by the 2x squared, and I just get 2x squared. And multiply it by the negative 4, and I get minus 4. The last thing that I do is combine like terms. Let's start with the highest power, that 4x cubed there. Doesn't have anything that it can be combined with. So we dealt with that. Next move on to the x squared. So we have a 2x squared plus a 2x squared, which gives us 4x squared. We'll move on to the x's. Minus 8x plus x is minus 7x. And finally, that minus 4 on the end will give us our answer. So multiply each term in the first group by each term in the second group. Now the fourth, and sometimes most difficult operation that we're going to do with polynomials is dividing. You're going to see two cases. We might divide by a monomial, something on the bottom with only one term, a 2b. Now if that happens, we can break up the top, break up the numerator, and put each one individually over the 2b. So I can write 4b squared over 2b. I can write 3b over 2b. And I can write minus 1 over 2b. Now I can simplify each one individually. So I have 4 over 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. I have b squared over b. Well, b squared is really b times b. So how about we get rid of one of those b's on the top and the bottom? So what we're left with is just a 2b there. Let's move on to the second group. The 3 and the 2 have to stay, but I can cross off those b's, giving me just a 3 halves. And finally, minus 1 over 2b, there's no simplification that we can do there. So when dividing by a monomial, you just take each term on the top and divide by that term on the bottom. Now, what if we are dividing by a binomial or by a polynomial? In that case, we need to use long division. Let's review long division that you learned probably a long time ago, just with regular numbers. Let's say I had 43 divided by 3, and I wasn't going to use a calculator. So what I would do is I would say, well, how many times does 3 go into 4? Oh, it goes in 1 time. Now I multiply the 1 by the 3 and put it down here and subtract. 4 minus 3 is 1, and you drop down the 3. Hopefully this is sounding a little bit familiar. Then I say again, how many times does 3 go into 13? Well, it goes 4 times. 4 times 3 is 12. Write that down here and subtract. We have 1 left over. Now that 1 is our remainder. First we used to say R1, meaning remainder 1, and then we learned that we can actually write that as 1 over this number, 1/3. So 14 and 1/3. That's how we learned long division. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to look at, so let's say we have 2n squared minus 5n minus 3 all over n minus 3. And I'll write it this way, 2n squared minus 5n minus 3 divided by n minus 3. Now I'm going to look at the first terms, n and 2n squared. How many times, it's the same question that I asked over here, but now I say how many times does n go into 2n squared? Or what do I need to multiply the n by to get 2n squared? Well, if I multiply it by 2n, 2n times n is 2n squared. So I write the 2n on the top, and then just as over here I multiplied 1 by 3 and put it below, I'll multiply 2n by n minus 3 and put it down here underneath. 2n times n is 2n squared. 2n times negative 3 is negative 6n, and I'm going to subtract. Make sure you subtract the whole thing. So the 2n squared minus 2n squared is nothing. Negative 5n minus negative 6n. Well, minus a negative is really plus, so negative 5n plus 6n, negative 5 plus 6 is just 1. 1n down here. And then we drop it down. Just like we dropped down the 3 over there, we drop down the minus 3 over here. Now I say, well, how many times does n go into n? Again, just look at the first term there. How many times does n go into n? Well, 1 time. So I put a plus 1, and I multiply. 1 times n minus 3 is n minus 3. I subtract. N minus n is 0. Negative 3 minus a negative 3. So negative 3 plus 3 is 0. So I'm done. The answer is 2n plus 1. Now just notice that if you were to get anything down here, like just a number if it was 2, then you would put that 2 over the n minus 3 as your remainder, just like we put the 1 over the 3 here. So I hope that helps. Please feel free to ask me any questions that you have about polynomials.